Thank you, Craig. Our featured speaker today is Clint McGuire. Clint is a multi-talented artist who has packed a lot of living in his 60 years of life. He's been an actor, a poet, a photographer, a teacher, and a seafood clerk. This fall, he starts a new journey as he pursues his MDiv, Masters of Divinity, at Columbia Theological Seminary, which is just like, yay! And he's married to our beautiful musician, Kathy McGuire, and is the father of Aaron. Please join me in welcoming Clint McGuire.
All right, so I admit this is not the usual topic you would find here, but then again, it kind of is. So anyway, I kind of want to start off by talking a little bit about back in the 1970s. There was this show called Super Friends, where you had the Earth's greatest superheroes and Aquaman, who would get together and fight crime, big and small. And when that show came out when I was a child, my brother Steve and I, we chose our favorite superheroes. And he chose Superman, and I was left with Batman. Little did I realize at age 7 that this would have a very consequential effect upon my life. Now, in comic book terms, I've never been a Justice League type. I never considered myself the main character in my own story, just kind of a side character who happens to be on the scene. If there was one superhero group I identified with, it was one called the Outsiders. This was a group formed by Batman during the time when he was on the outs with the Justice League. And it was composed of people who weren't necessarily part of the cut and paste superhero mold. You had Katana, who was a Japanese swordsmith who could take you down with just a swing of her enchanted blade. You had Metamorpho, who could transform himself into pretty much any kind of element or compound that needed to be used in fighting crime. You had Black Lightning, who had powers of electricity. And I identified with this group because I realized somewhere down the line that if I were ever to become a superhero, I'd more likely be an outsider than a JLA member, Justice League of America. Now, being an outsider can hurt, but it can also give you a view of the world that people standing in the comfortable center simply don't have. And anybody can be an outsider in the right circumstance. I'm sure there's been some situation where we've all been kind of on the outside looking in and wondering, okay, how do I fit? Or do I fit at all? And I felt left out because of my own social peers, my profession, my belief system, my generation, or simply because I was a kid who preferred listening to shortwave radio to AM. So, what makes somebody an outsider? I can generally divide these into 3 types. You have the involuntary outsider, who's somebody who's excluded due to sex, race, religion, social status, disability, appearance, poverty, nationality, or any number of factors. You have the circumstantial outsider. That's your new kid in town, the new hire, the transfer student, the immigrant, the visitor, the newcomer. And then there's the voluntary outsider, someone who refuses to conform. And Batman pretty much fits into that last category pretty well. And think of it this way. Bruce Wayne, millionaire, I guess nowadays probably billionaire. $1 million doesn't go as far as it once did. But Bruce Wayne could rub elbows with all hoi polloi in a big, beautiful ballroom. But as Batman, he prefers to look in from the outside, brooding on rooftops. And sometimes the person outside the ballroom can see things that insiders can't. And there are several advantages and drawbacks to being an outsider. And I'd kind of like to go through those here. First advantage is that outsiders can see the whole room. When you're outside a group, you're less likely to accept its assumptions automatically. Think of Mr. Spock from Star Trek. He's half Vulcan, half human. Not wholly either one or the other, but he's able to see aspects of both cultures that might not otherwise be apparent. In the real world, you might see investigative journalists, whistleblowers, or newcomers at a job site that are taking up the outside observer mantle, who maybe see things that have always been done a certain way, and they go, you might try this instead. And so sometimes the best seat in the house isn't the front row. Sometimes it's just standing in the aisle. The first drawback is that outsiders get lonely. Perspective can have a price. And being an outsider can often mean isolation, rejection, constantly wondering where you're welcome, or whether you're welcome even. Take Batman, for example. His independence gives him strength, but his instinct to isolate repeatedly damages his relationships. Or Frankenstein's creature. He initially longs for companionship, but he gradually becomes monstrous, partly because every attempt at belonging is rejected. Humans need community, and being independent is not the same as needing no one. Second advantage, outsiders can cross boundaries. People firmly embedded in one tribe sometimes have difficulty understanding someone in another. And Superman is a prime example of this. He is both alien and human. He is Kryptonian and he is Kansan. Much of his moral imagination comes from belonging completely to neither world. In the real world, people who exist between cultures often become mediators, interpreters, bridge builders, and someone with exposure to a variety of religious traditions can sometimes recognize common ethical ideas that insiders focused on doctrinal boundaries overlook. An outsider can be a wall, but they can also be a bridge. Second drawback, which side are you on? It's the flip side of boundary crossing, and that's suspicion. Examples may come from political independents who are distrusted by both sides, interfaith thinkers accused of not being sufficiently orthodox, or artists who don't fit in any one genre. Batman encounters this constantly. Commissioner Gordon trusts him, but the people of Gotham never entirely do, and sometimes that's on their own natural instinct. Sometimes it's something that is brought onto them by outside forces. And even amongst his own fellow fellow superheroes, his refusal to completely submit to the group norms make others question him. So, the independence that makes an outsider useful, well, can also make the outsider suspect. Third advantage, outsiders can reinvent the rules. If nobody gives you a place at the table, then sometimes you just got to build another table. Punk was started by people who were otherwise excluded from the mainstream of rock music. And they went on to create their own labels, clothing, hairstyles, magazines, and culture. Batman's another example. He has no powers, which is an unusual state for a superhero. And so it's a rarity that you find someone who doesn't have power but is still able to fight crime. And amongst all these demigods and mutants and aliens and Amazons, he says, hey, here's my utility belt, here's my cape, here's my unresolved emotional issues, let's go. But because he doesn't play by the normal superhero rules, he becomes indispensable. Drawback 3 is the identity trap. And there's a danger of becoming so accustomed to exclusion that you begin to protect your outsider status. You can start assuming that nobody understands me. Institutions are always wrong. Belonging means selling out. Disagreement proves persecution. Accepting help compromises independence. And Batman's greatest flaw isn't that he's an outsider. It's that sometimes he refuses to come inside even when someone opens the door. Alfred, Superman, Commissioner Gordon, people keep offering him connections, and sometimes Bruce accepts it. Sometimes he disappears onto another roof. So what does this have to do with me? We've covered Batman, we've covered the outsiders. Well, for me, in my slightly advanced age, I have realized 3 things. 1, I have been excluded, mostly during my middle and high school years. I have sometimes chosen the outside when I discovered that conformity wasn't worth the price of admission. And I've learned that belonging and individuality are opposites. Just as an example, a couple months ago, I went out to a mini reunion for my college theater program. And I kind of had a long track in getting my Bachelor of Arts degree, but which was kind of a bothersome thing in some respects, but in another was also good because I got to meet a whole lot of very wonderful, amazing people in that program. And I saw some of them during this reunion. There were some who I talked to regularly, social media or in person even. And there are some faces that I hadn't seen in decades. And it was really good to see them. And we chatted and we caught up on things, talked about marriages and kids and jobs and all the things you want to know about people that you haven't kept in touch with for a while. And there was a moment where we were just kind of sitting around and hanging out. And I reflected on this meeting and how I sometimes felt like the outsider even then. And as I thought about it, I realized this one thing that I did not realize at the age of 21. I never had to fit in with these people. I just had to be a part of what we were making together. That is one of the charms of theater, is it almost requires outsiders to get things things done. To join together. A production doesn't succeed because everybody behaves the same. It succeeds because everybody brings something different. They never asked me to fit in, they just asked me to contribute. And Batman didn't assemble the outsiders because he needed 5 people who thought exactly like Batman. I mean, God help Gotham City if he did. But he needed people who could do the things that he couldn't. Now, Batman may be the quintessential loner, but he's also one of the most fascinating things about his world is that this loner keeps accumulating people. Whether it's the Commissioner, Superman, Batgirl, Robin, all these, the outsiders, all these people who just come into his life and are there, whether he wants to admit that he needs them or not. And perhaps that's the final lesson here. Being an outsider doesn't mean being alone. It can mean finding others staring through different windows. And maybe the object of all of this, isn't to spend our lives trying to get inside. Maybe it's to learn what we can from the view out here and find the other people looking through the windows. And occasionally remember that when somebody opens the door for us, it's okay to walk in. Even Batman eventually learned that.